Welcome to PHNX Suns, where you get in-depth basketball analysis, hard-hitting reporting on NBA trades, and you learn about the primary colors. Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome into the PHNX Suns show. Of course, brought to you by our friends over at Bet365. Download the Bet365 app and use code PHNX365 when you sign up. And find out why, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. And no ordinary jackets or shirts on today's show. I'm Eric. I'm wearing red. That's Gerald. He's wearing gold. It looks a little bit like yellow. And that's Steven. He is wearing blue. I don't know what y'all are wearing in the chat, but I appreciate every one of you being in here. Ashley, Leo, Marc, Amir, King J-Rock, all of you, make sure you're hitting that like button. Make sure you're subscribing to PHNX Sports. Start your new year off strong. We just hit 35,000 subscribers on the channel, and it keeps going. Before we dive into practice updates, a Jimmy Butler update, and so much more, Gerald, you made Suns Twitter so happy today.
I really did.
With some reporting around Jusuf Nurkic.
Yeah, so again, take this for what you will. This is one source, but my source says that the Suns are not currently actively shopping Jusuf Nurkic. That doesn't mean that they would not trade Jusuf Nurkic. And it doesn't mean that they believe necessarily that Jusuf Nurkic is their guy, their center that they can contend with. But as of right now, at this point in time, from what I'm being told, they're not actively shopping him. And part of that is just because the trade market is only starting to heat up right now. There's still over a month until the trade deadline. And as you would imagine, like, Jusuf Nurkic doesn't have a ton of trade value at this point. Like, as much as you all are so desperate to trade this guy, you have to keep in mind it takes two teams to make a trade happen.
Yeah.
Like, someone has to want Jusuf Nurkic, or you have to attach something to him in order to make a move. So that would be the problem there, because, you know, everyone in the Suns fandom has been aware that Nurk has been rough this season. I'm sure everyone around the league is aware of that information as well. So you're looking at a situation where you have 3 tradable second-round picks, extra second-round picks that you can trade. You have your first-round pick in 2031. That's the only one that you can trade over the next 7 years. So if you are going to attach that pick to something, you have to make the absolute most of that trade. I know that the Suns highly value that pick. They know that it's one of their limited assets. So it's kind of one of those things where you have to do the math. It doesn't mean that the Suns are perfectly content with their roster as is, that they believe Nurk is their guy. It just means that as of right now, they are not shopping him. That can change over the next few weeks based on what happens. So take that for what you will.
Steven, what was your initial reaction when you saw Gerald's reporting out there earlier today?
I mean, it's consistent with what he's been saying since as long as I can remember. And it's right in alignment with what we've been saying. Like, I hate to press the "I told you so" button, but we've literally been saying the same thing. So this is not like, oh my God, I never would have anticipated or expected this. But at the same time, it's a harsh reality. Honestly, this is where the team has been with Nurkic since they traded for him. They traded with a team that had a player that was viewed in the same respect by the front office and the franchise. This is pretty much what you signed up for. You knew you weren't probably going to have a player that was better than when you received him. And needless to say, he's not that right now. His stock hasn't gotten much lower outside of right after the sweep that took place against the Minnesota Timberwolves. So he's really not going to be able to rebuild his stock. Might have to attach an asset in some capacity if you really do plan on using him as a piece to facilitate some type of improvement on your roster.
Yeah, and you never know also when you said that the trade market is still shaping up as well. And we'll get to practice updates in a second. But since we're, dissecting this now, might as well keep it going. Random things happen in the NBA. New developments happen. If I told you that De'Aaron Fox and the Sacramento Kings at a certain point would want to be potentially parting ways at the beginning of the season, I don't think many people would have seen that coming. And so you always have to keep that maybe the hope alive. And I don't mean to feed people hope, but maybe a month from now, a couple weeks down the line, a team's situation changes and they think maybe we can just take on Jusuf Nurkic, get some sort of draft compensation, even if it is just a second-round pick, 2 second-round picks, right? And just deal with it at that point that right now on January 2nd isn't sitting there, and maybe something changes with the Suns as well. I know that I'm not going to put my money on it, but last season we saw Jusuf Nurkic be a valuable, positive piece for this team and play good basketball and could be a player that maybe some teams could talk themselves into if he comes back and plays better than he has so far this season, which again, I'm not going to put my money on. You could be able to slightly increase that value and it could open up a couple of doors that are closed right now, Gerald.
Yeah, it could. And I do think that, like, to most of us, that probably feels unlikely. I still feel like you're going to have to attach something to Nurk to get a deal done. And you're probably going to have to lower your bar of what you're expecting in return for Nurk. I know a lot of people want to trade him for a starting caliber center. The problem is, and we've talked about this at length before, is with the second tax apron restrictions that you're up against, you cannot take back more money than Jusuf Nurkic's $18 million salary that you're sending out. There aren't a lot of starting caliber centers in this league. If you're looking at, we need a starting caliber center for a contender, that make less than $18 million. Like a Jakob Poeltl, he makes more than that. Nikola Vucevic makes more than that. So a lot of these guys that we've consistently brought up, like Nick Richards and Goga Bitadze, they're gambles. They're guys that might be better off as high-end backups, but they're kind of the only ones that have the salary under that threshold that might be available, that you might be able to get if you attach a pick or two, a couple second rounders, that type of thing, or that 2031 first rounder that you really have to save for the right deal. So you combine that restriction with the fact that you can't combine contracts to take on a larger one, it really kind of pigeonholes you into a spot where you don't have a ton of options in terms of finding a center for center trade that works for Nurkic that another team would actually be interested in. So it's kind of a tough position to be in. And I think that is probably if you want to read between the lines of my report there, I think that might be an underlying cause of it more than anything else.
Yeah, that was the point that I was going to bring up, where it's going to be some risk involved if you're trying to get one of the pieces that you can actually attain, because you can't go and strike for something more than what Nurkic's contractual value gives you on the market. So that puts you in a catch. It might get to the point where I think the Suns will have to take a risk on one of those guys, assuming and hoping that another team participates and involves themselves with the dance that you're trying to get into. But say Nick Richards comes through, I think that naturally puts the team in a position where what I've been speaking to is they need to lean more in the small ball. So you have a center that has clear flaws, but you might view him as a little bit more of an upgrade to what you already have. That center plays 25, 27 minutes a game, and then the rest of the game you're cycling through small ball options. That might be the best bet for this team. That might juice their versatility. You need to find another piece, not necessarily Dorian Finney-Smith because he's not available now, but someone that can help to add to your small ball lineup room in particular to help kind of counterbalance the value that you might lose in the center realm.
I look, no matter what, if they trade Jusuf Nurkic or if they don't, and whoever they're even able to get as a center, even if it's, let's say, like a Jonas Valanciunas, which has been thrown out there as well, which there are certain, hurdles that come with trading for him and to be able to trade him as well. You're still looking at a team that has a lot of flaws, but right now it feels like the biggest one is the center rotation, and that's Jusuf Nurkic and that's Mason Plumlee as well. When he comes back, if the Suns want to compete, if they want to be where they need to be, they need him to be better. I'm not so sure he's going to be able to do that. And then you start looking at the future, like, is this season then a season where you kind of have to throw your hands up and say, you know what, we're just kind of strung out by the way our roster is built. We're not able to unload Jusuf Nurkic. Nobody wants him. He's on our roster. Is there maybe a reality where if he continues to play like this, where he does fall out of the rotation, or are you living and dying by Nurk until the bitter end?
Yeah, it's a depressing possibility for sure. I do think there's a possibility that Nurk is on the roster past the trade deadline. And again, not necessarily because the Suns believe this is their guy, but because you just literally can't trade him without having to attach an asset that you need to keep. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he's even the starting center past the trade deadline. Maybe you swing a move and you have 4 centers on the roster, and Nurk gets supplanted in the starting lineup. Like, there's a lot of possibilities that could happen, that could unfold over the next few weeks. You can still make other trades as well. Just maybe Nurk has really bad value. That doesn't prohibit you from making other trades to try and bring in a center. But it is worth remembering. And I do want to get this out there, because a lot of people keep going back to, we should never have traded DA. This trade was terrible. I understand it. Like, it's looking like a bad trade, especially when Grayson Allen is not having the best start to this season. People always forget that he was part of that exchange. I understand it, but at the same time, the Suns and DA had hit their breaking point. DA wanted, he had been public and vocal about this, he wanted more of an offensive role. He wanted to expand his offensive game. He wasn't doing that behind a big 3 of KD, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant, and he wasn't doing that behind a big 3 of KD, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. So that was going to hit a breaking point. It was already as uncomfortable as it was the season before, when he wanted that expanded role. And I also can say with certainty that the trade offers for DeAndre Ayton that summer were not good. Like, that was the option that was available to them. So again, I understand some people are saying, well, you should have just kept him and worked through it and tried to get through it. At least you would have had an athletic rim running center. I understand that point of view totally. But I do think that both sides had kind of hit that breaking point, and the offers for DA were really bad that summer.
And when that expiration date comes for a player or a coach, and we saw it in succession, one after another, you have to cut your ties for the sake of the greater good of the team,
right?
To salvage what you do have in house. And to your point, which is kind of what I was mentioning earlier with DeAndre Ayton and the way the league viewed him, but also the way the team viewed him. There was a 1-for-1 match. No one else was trading with the Portland Trailblazers for Jusuf Nurkic. No one else was trading, at least for something that they actually valued in return. And the same goes for the Phoenix Suns with DeAndre Ayton. That makes for a perfect marriage for, okay, Spider-Man meme, you have something that no one else wants. We have something that no one else wants. Are you interested? And they got to the point where both teams did the Michael Jordan shrug, and we are where we are now, where both teams are disgruntled with the players that they got back in return for the trade, from those 2 players in particular.
Well, yeah, and the grass is always greener, too. If DeAndre Ayton had stayed on the Phoenix Suns and the situation became untenable, like, then you're looking at your stars, like a Devin Booker and a Kevin Durant. I know there are people in the chat right now saying Kevin Durant will request a trade if Nurk is still on the team, right? Because of just what the situation is. And I'm not sure that's true, but you can tell by even the way that Book was talking about Ayton after they played each other for the first time and Ayton had a good game. And Book was like, I'd like to see him do that every night, good for him.
And that's what Chauncey Billups has been saying every game since then as well.
Right, and it's not like DA, and this is so off the rails of what we meant to talk about, but we're here, so screw it. It's not like DA has been this consistent force in Portland that you talk yourself into and you're like, wow. It's so funny because I feel like once every month and a half, a random aggregator NBA account goes, y'all forgot about DeAndre, and look at the stat line he put up tonight, and it's really impressive. And you're like, what else has he been doing? And you look at his other stats, and you're like, ugh. And then you hear Portland fans talk about the effort. You hear Chauncey Billups talk about it as well. And then you just get to the point where if he was still on this team, even with his athleticism, even with his rim running, with where we are talking about when it comes to vibes and leadership and everything, even with last season, you can't tell me that this would be a team in a better situation. You would still be strung out with a large contract of somebody who doesn't really want to be here, but the only difference is it would be basically double what Jusuf Nurkic is making. The reality is both ways. The Suns have had a problem with the center position, and that is not something that I think can go unaddressed for them to actually be legitimate title contenders, Steven.
I mean, yeah, I can't say anything more than what you just said on that. You got it. And I would like for this team to have found something with more versatility at the center position.
Yeah.
I know that's asking for a lot. I know there's not that many options available, but I mean, you just saw someone in the chat mention the name Miles Turner. Amidst the DeAndre Ayton conversations, that was the one name that I was high on. I was like, you guys should have just went and made that happen. I know it comes with inherent things that you have to add to insulate him. He's not a great rebounder at all. He has his defensive efficiencies past protecting the paint. But you do what you can to get a player that can infuse your offense with something that it's just never had.
Yeah,
that's a floor spacer that gives you 5 out, and that gives you all types of versatility that trumps any other value that any other piece that you could actually have feasibly added on either end of the floor.
I remember during that time, there were back-to-back years when you were looking at, okay, potentially trading Ayton or potentially sign and trading Ayton before he got that max extension. And I brought up Miles Turner both times, and a lot of people hated it. And I understood because at the time, especially coming off the finals and then that New Orleans Pelicans series as well, it was like, okay, this guy still has a higher ceiling. But man, hindsight being 2020, that trade would have been good for this team considering where things have gone since then.
And I think for me, the biggest thing, I know people were naturally gravitating to DeAndre Ayton because you saw his impact in the Suns context directly in back-to-back seasons that were two of the franchise's best in this history. But if you look past that and you look at what you needed more of in that playoff series, you provide Devin Booker and Chris Paul with more spacing, and you provide them with someone that can roll, but they can also pop. And the dynamic that presents to any type of defensive scheme that they might try to put toward against either of those two. It's just the context, and you put a puzzle piece like that in there. I don't know. If I'm James Jones, I'm trying to roll the dice on that.
Yeah, I think you've seen that with the skill set. Even when Jusuf Nurkic was good last season, which was for an extended period of time, and you're at a point where it was like this guy's actually bringing a good amount of value. The fit wasn't exactly as perfect as they touted it to be when they made that trade. And now you go to this year and you kind of feel like Jusuf Nurkic is a little bit out of it, right? He doesn't seem like he's really fully at the same level that he was last year, but he's lost weight. He's had more of an unlocked role. He's talked about wanting to shoot threes. Like, it feels like it was set up for him to actually take a step forward, and he took a step back. And that's a lot of people on this team where you're starting to see now it seems like chemistry and focus is kind of being torn apart a little bit. And that's going to lead to what we're going to talk about after this break, which actually one of our diehards mentioned, which is the Jimmy Butler trade rumors. Are the trade rumors surrounding the Phoenix Suns quietly tearing them apart? We're going to break that down right after this break. Listen, we love Verizon. Verizon Access gets you into the experiences that you love. And right now we're teaming up with Verizon to hook you up with free Suns tickets. Can you break the curse? We couldn't break it on New Year's Eve for our sweet takeover when they took on the Memphis Grizzlies. Maybe you can in just 10 days on January 12th as the Phoenix Suns take on the Charlotte Hornets. And Verizon wants to hook you up with 4 lower level seats to a Suns game against the Hornets. And the best part is it comes with that sweet, sweet prepaid parking. Head to gophnx.com/Verizon, and when you're a Verizon customer, you get Verizon Access, tickets to the best in sports, music, and entertainment. You also get their award-winning 5G network to power your day. Get ready for those free Suns tickets. Register right now at gophnx.com/Verizon. That's gophnx.com/Verizon. And thank you to Verizon for hooking up our PHNX family. No purchase necessary at all. Sweepstakes end tomorrow, Friday, January 3rd. Enter while you can. And big shout out to our friends over Sanderson Ford. PHNX is proud to partner with Sanderson Ford as our official vehicle partner. They're thankful to be around in Glendale for the past 70 years, helping out people like you find the best car. Not just in the fact that you need to find a car, and maybe not just a car at the right price, but the right car at the right price at the right time. And that's exactly why they do no hassle, no pressure, no nonsense over at Sanderson Ford. They have fantastic people and a fantastic 65-acre facility, the largest one in the nation. Speaking of the nation, they sell more Fords than anybody in the nation. And not just in Arizona, but they are America's most awarded Ford dealership when it comes to customer satisfaction. And as you, the customer, that should be pretty important. Get a new 2024 F-150 truck with 3.9 APR financing for 66 months, plus up to $4,000 cash back with similar savings on over 900 new and pre-owned vehicles on the lot. We still have so much more that we're going to break down on this edition of PHNX Suns. We thank all of you for joining us here as we start the new year. Make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. Help us get to 40K. Listen, 35K is great. We're glad to ring in the new year with 35K. But I know there are some of you right now who are watching. Maybe you're listening on audio, and we love all of our audio listeners, and you haven't jumped over on YouTube. It's free. Hit that subscribe button. Help us get to 40K. Maybe that will switch up the Suns vibes. And they seem like they've been at an all-time low. And I want to shout out Psycho Blue, who actually has dropped a super chat for us today. So let's read that super chat and then get into the topic they kind of brought up in our Die Hard Discord today. It says, Basketball Cthulhu notes that this is the third terrible December for Phoenix in 3 years across 3 coaches, 3 different rosters, and 2 owners. James Jones is the common factor. If Ishbia is serious about winning, it might be time to let James Jones go. I know that's been not a topic of heavy debate on here, but it's been brought up once or twice, Gerald, that there are only 2 constants on this team over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Devin Booker and James Jones.
Yeah, no, and I get it. I don't know if James Jones has to do specifically with the December part of that equation, but yeah, I mean, I feel like it's tough because we've talked about this before, and I don't know that offering up James Jones as a piece of meat to kind of satisfy the people changes much because of the way that they've changed their front office complexion. Like, yeah, obviously James Jones is part of that, and he's been the constant since, things started going downhill. But at the same time, like Josh Bartelstein, Matt Ishbia, James Jones, they all collaborate. Mike Budenholzer, even the coach, same thing with Frank Vogel when he was here. They are all collaborating on this. This is not a one person, it's a group project right now. So if letting go of James Jones somehow changes the equation, then I get that. But I don't know. I can't speak with certainty that that would be the case.
And it's also at the point where I know Espo has kind of taken the other side of this just in the fact that he wants some sort of change. And there is something to be said, Steven, whether it's James Jones, whether it's not, if it's a trade among the margins, whatever it could be, to send a message to everybody and say, like, this is not okay. Where we are right now, like from Matt Ishbia's perspective, 30,000 feet up in the air, looking down at the state of the Phoenix Suns, the amount of money that's been invested, the time, the expectations put on this team by themselves, it's not acceptable. And if you just continue to keep the status quo, same old, it kind of tells people that it's fine. You just got to let it happen and see what goes on.
That's definitely how it comes across. If I'm thinking and really trying to play the role of Matt Ishbia, and you speak to the deposits in money monetarily, as well as his efforts from day one, one thing about people in the business realm, regardless of what spectrum of business it is, they're looking for a return on investment. And you can talk about ticket sales, you can talk about the advertising around the city, you can talk about the morale of the team. All of that stuff is cute, but pales in comparison to the ultimate thing in return, which is a ring, the Larry O'Brien trophy. That is the return on investment that Matt Ishbia signed up for. That's clearly what his intentions have been directly aligned with on the women's side of basketball as well as with the Phoenix Suns. And he's waiting for things to align because it hasn't felt like it's been an alignment there since maybe that first 2.5, 3 months of his position as far as ownership when it became official.
Yeah, and Espo in the chat adding his thoughts says, at some point your rope as a GM runs out. The failed drafts previously, along with the lack of success now, is why it points to James Jones for me. And let's say, like, even if it's not James Jones' fault, he would not be the first general manager to take the fall for something that isn't fully up to him. Like, there are players we've talked about that need to take more accountability that, especially when it's on the court, whether it's a Jusuf Nurkic or beyond, on, hey, your play needs to change. Whether it's been all the previous coaches, well, you are looking at 3 coaches in 3 years. Through the coaches that you let go, it seemed like the right choice at the time, each step along the way. It wasn't like, wow, this is completely out of left field. This is sports. People get blamed for things that are either partially in their control or not in their control at all. And if that's where James Jones falls, he's not going to be the first or the last victim of that circumstance at all. And so I don't expect him to be let go, and I don't expect really anybody to be fired mid-season. But it does feel like there's this weight over this team of them feeling change looming. And our diehard Psycho Blue, who dropped that super chat, kind of linked to where the vibes fell off for the Phoenix Suns, paired with the times that Jimmy Butler first came out and said he wants to be on the Phoenix Suns. And then the Bradley Beal conversation happened. Gerald, I know they're never going to say anything when you ask them about, does that affect yourself? Like, I know Bradley Beal talked about it as well. But if you put yourself in their shoes from a human element, could you see how that might affect their ability to be 100% locked in at work every day?
Absolutely. And not to make excuses for the way that this team has played recently by any means, because we've talked about all the things on court that need to be better. And a lot of times it starts with effort and focus, things that you should come with every night. But I do think that constant looming threat overhead can have an impact on you as a human being. It's undeniable. And I do think, to your point, that has been something that has loomed over this franchise for a while now.
Yeah.
Because ever since Mikal and Cam Johnson got traded for KD, which again is a trade that I've said it then, I'll say it again, like you do that 11 out of 10 times. But ever since that trade, it was kind of like, okay, no one is expendable. We are going to keep changing things until we get to where we want to go. The all-in approach is the approach you want your organization to have, but that is a potential downside to where when you bring guys here, they know that if they don't perform, and you know, this is just kind of common in the NBA, it's expectation. If you don't perform, you're liable to get traded, but it's especially pertinent here, I feel like, when you have a team that's headlined by Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and that team is underwhelming. You know what I mean? Like
not even just the point where, you know, they're winning games, but it's like the beginning of the season where they're only winning by 1 point.
Mm-hmm.
You're losing so many games that you shouldn't be losing. Mm-hmm. And the fan support, you're getting booed at your own home court. Everybody's on social media talking about trade this, trade that. Some people are saying trade your stars, blow it up.
Right.
Even as unplugged as some people can be, you can't escape that when you're a public figure at all.
No, you can't. And it can impact your play. It can impact the way that you look at things. And I know a lot of these guys say we, you know, try to block it out. We try to ignore it, just focus on what we're doing. But it does seep in, you know, even if you're not on it personally, you could have a friend that sends you a link or a family member that's like, I can't believe this. Like it's hard to stay in a bubble when, you know, all of us are talking about it constantly, when all the fans are talking about this guy's trash, trade him. It does take a toll on you. And I think that I will say with the Jimmy Butler stuff in particular, though, that one, I don't know how much I read into that, because the only player that would be affected by that is Bradley Beal. Mm-hmm. And so maybe it's impacting him, but he, you know, when we talked to him, he said, we haven't had any conversations about it. And he's aware that he has the power in that situation with the no trade thing. So I don't know that Jimmy Butler stuff in particular is affecting this team, but I do think just the constant, you know, the place that we've been in for 2 years now, where it's championship or bust and everyone outside of KD and Book is expendable, I think that can have an impact on the role guys.
For me, that like, I don't disagree that it takes a toll over time. But name a team in the NBA that is excluded from this, though.
Mm-hmm.
Boston.
Like, if you have great, no, because even still, if you have good players, guess what?
Oh, I mean, like in previous years, in previous years, Boston, Jaylen Brown has been on the table.
And to your point, that's a team that was in not necessarily as drastic of dire straits as the Suns, but they were in a situation where Brad Stevens was being questioned, even though he was clearly should you trade Jaylen Brown or keep Jason Tatum? Like, which one? You can't choose both. They ultimately obviously choose both. They see it through, and they cycle through the rotation of all of their role players essentially being gone, and then them resetting the table, even bringing back and then leaving and then bringing back Al Horford again. That's an example in it all. So that's just the shuffling of the deck. You figure out your two pieces that you want to build around. Obviously, age-wise, it's a complete different spectrum between Devin Booker and KD versus Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. But it's going to be like that. When you sign up to be a contender, especially on the constraints that the Suns did so, this is literally what you signed up for.
Yeah, and we've mentioned the margins is where this Phoenix Suns team is losing, especially without their superstars, right? When you're missing, you're either an offensive shooter like Grayson Allen, or you're missing a Booker or a Durant or even a Bradley Beal at this point. You need to make up on the small things: energy, effort, communication, defense, like rebounding, like literal hustle. Like that's how you win these types of games. And it feels like that's where they are missing out. And Mario Not Bros 2 brought it up earlier in the chat, says Cam Johnson talked about it. 100% it's affecting them. We're going to play you a Cam Johnson soundbite from the Young Man of the Three podcast. And we do have an update on the Jimmy Butler trade status. Espo was able to talk to NBA insider and part of DLLS Mavs, Marc Stein, earlier today. So we have a pretty extensive update on that, all of that situation, everything coming up after another break. Maybe you can't trust the Phoenix Suns to go out there and scrap their way to a win, but you can absolutely trust Desert Financial Credit Union take care of you every step of the way. If you're an Arizona sports fan, there's no better place to do your banking than Desert Financial Credit Union. But if you're just an Arizona resident, There's no better place to do your banking than Desert Financial Credit Union. I tell you that as somebody whose family has been in DFCU for 3 generations. My grandparents, my parents, and myself. From my first job that I got in the middle of high school to today, when life is simple to when it's complicated, checkings and savings accounts to mortgages, loans, and credit cards, investment options, and more. Desert Financial Credit Union has been doing it for more than 84 years and doing it with great customer service, a smile on their face, and so many locations across the valley. And the best part about all of it, to show that they care, when you open up a free checking account online, you can get $200 in bonuses. Get started by visiting desertfinancial.com/200. And also love to welcome on the Carol Royce team. Let's get this out of the way, because once I read the ad, I know you're going to want to do it. Write this number down. Call 480-776-5231 or visit Carol Royce's website. Carol Royce Real Estate Team is family owned, locally operated, with generations of family members serving the Valley and the Sun. They have an unbeatable track record, having sold over 12,000 homes across the Valley. Carol knows the Arizona real estate market. And that's, again, the important keyword there is the Arizona market. And name anybody else who's doing this. Other big agents, they make promises. Carol Royce gives you written guarantees. Sellers, you can rest easy knowing you're not just making the right choice, you're making a guaranteed one. Your home sold for 100% of the market value, or Carol will pay you the difference. That's a guarantee. If you're considering selling your home in 2025, the name to trust is Carol Royce, your home sold guaranteed realty. Have questions? Call today or visit Carol online at carolroyceteam.com. That's carolroyceteam.com. So let's get to this soundbite from Cam Johnson on the young man in the 3. Now, to give a little context, this is a conversation between Cam Johnson and Sue Bird about rebuilding teams, and how knowing that you might get traded or your team might move you will affect you as a player. And while the Suns aren't rebuilding, I think this is still pretty prominent.
The thing that pushes a lot of success in team sports, from my limited experience, is buy-in and pride in what you're doing. And so the best way to achieve success on a team level is when that buy-in and that pride is at all-time highs, when it's peaking, because that's when the camaraderie, that's when everything starts to flow, the synergy, and you're able to play your best ball as a team. There's a lot that gets in the way of it on a professional level. And one of those things can be uncertainty of your future, whether it's yourself getting traded, whether it's your teammates getting traded, anything like that. And just those little shreds of doubt can be very difficult for teams to overcome, because, like, the margin for error is always really small. Always really small. It's a little bit of lack of communication, a little bit of a lack of trust, and just a tiny bit of disinterested, feelings from any one player out of 5, and how good players are at the professional level, you're going to get exposed. Mm-hmm. So a lot of elements at play anytime this comes up. And if you're on a team where, trade speculation is high, you maybe could potentially assume that comes with it.
Buy-in and pride are the operative words that I took away from everything that Cam so eloquently communicated to us. And also want to mention him having that conversation with the legendary Sue Bird is
awesome.
That is just like, if you ignore when this podcast was put out, what was it, a week or two ago now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You did yourself a severe disservice, and among other things, just not listening to it off of the names alone.
I went back and listened to it because I wasn't able to listen when it first dropped. I just saw this Cam soundbite over the weekend. I went and listened to the whole thing. It is fantastic. But back to the negative, how does that affect this team, Steven?
Buy-in and pride. You talk about culture, all of these fun, loving words that teams like to throw around that speak to a team that's connected and a team that's not connected. Does it feel like the Suns have buy-in right now?
No.
Does it feel like the Suns are playing with pride right now?
No.
That does not speak to a team that's connected. It's not as complicated. The lines don't have to be as blurred as people make it. Yes, injuries matter. But again, and still, when you have a big 3 template that your roster is built off of, and you have 2 of those big 3, especially when 2 of those 3 are 2 of the most prolific scorers in the game, no worse than the top 12 between both of them combined, you figure out a way. You make it happen. And like I said, respective to whatever each game is demanding from you. We saw that's what they did in the first 9 games when they went 8-1, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
And they've just gotten so far removed from it, and these things have kind of got lost over the time because they just don't have the requisite level of buy-in that this team needs in comparison to their opponents. And the buy-in is just not there right now as well.
The buy-in's not there. The trust isn't there. The established system isn't there either because you have a new coaching staff in here. You have a lot of new supporting role players. Like, yes, you brought back your top 6 guys from last year, but now you're playing a totally different brand of basketball in terms of getting up a lot more threes, in terms of what you're trying to do defensively, in terms of the fact that to this point in the season, the 3 highest paid guys on your roster have played a fewer percentage of games together than they did all of last season. And last season, that number was only 50% of the games. Mm-hmm. So that's a problem in terms of trying to build that trust and be connected on a string defensively, know each other's tendencies offensively. When your roster is constantly shuffling, when you're doing it under a new coaching staff that only like Grayson Allen is really familiar with from his time in Milwaukee, and when you're having to deal with just kind of the emotional toll of injuries and trade rumors and all this different stuff, it can be easy for things like this to snowball. And none of this is to make an excuse for the way the Suns have played. They got to be better. But I don't think until they have one of these random nights where they come out here and just pop a decent team in the jaw and they put together a full game and they finally have that breakthrough moment like, okay, we can do this. We remember how to do this. Like, we're not falling back into bad habits and bad mindsets. Until that happens, I think you're going to continue to see what we've seen recently. And you're hoping that the change of the calendar helps a little bit. I know it sounds stupid, but Josh Okogie said at practice today that like Mike Budenholzer said like, hey, 2025, we're starting fresh. Like that needs to be our mindset. So, you know, it's not ideal that your team is having to approach it that way, but hopefully it pays dividends with these couple of days in between now and your next game.
And I'll say real quick, sorry, Erik.
No, please.
That's the last thing I want to hear from a head coach that just got here.
New year, new me.
The fresh
start already should have happened.
The fresh start was when you had your introductory press conference. Even before that, when you had your name into the team.
Yeah.
Before you had your introductory, because you started building relationships the day you signed the paper, even when you verbally agreed to do it.
Yeah.
So that you are far removed from that, and obviously not you, but speaking to the figurative coach, that's not reassuring in any capacity for me right now.
Yeah, it's not reassuring because it's happening, but at least it's being addressed at a certain point, right? Where if you do need a fresh start, it's better to not kick the can down the road and just be like, hello, guys, like we have something that we need to do here. And maybe it does only get fixed with a massive trade. And Got Game OTR with a $10 super chat has quite the interesting one.
Okay.
Thank you for your super chat. Says, I think LeBron is on his way to Phoenix in the offseason to play with KD. And Devin Booker is going to LA via sign and trade.
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think that'll happen. I do think LeBron, like, I think his interest in the recent past in Phoenix has been real.
Legit, yes.
But I don't think you're trading your much younger superstar for an older one. As much as Devin Booker is not LeBron James, we all know this, and it would be fun to see LeBron and KD play together. No.
Yeah, but what about maybe what seemed like a more realistic possibility in Jimmy Butler? Well, Espo talked to Marc Stein earlier today about that whole situation.
Name that people have talked about here, and it's likely because he's dyed his hair purple and orange within a week and a half period, is Jimmy Butler, who obviously isn't happy in Miami. We've heard Pat Riley come out and say that they're not actively looking to move Jimmy Butler. But to me, that doesn't seem like a road that will likely be traveled by the Suns. But what are you hearing from people you're talking to?
I'm sure the Suns would love to travel that road if they could. And I don't think there's any question that if Jimmy Butler is going to leave South Beach, where, let's face it, he has had a tremendous run in Miami. No, they haven't won a championship, but they went to the finals twice, led by Jimmy Butler, and they were a shot away from making it 3 trips to the finals in 5 years. He has been a fantastic player for the Heat, one of the best players in Heat history. To be honest, I don't doubt that Phoenix is an appealing destination for Jimmy Butler if it is time to leave. But the framing of this discussion has all been, or not all, but so much has been what the Suns would like and what Jimmy Butler might like, without taking into account Miami's stance. And I think Pat Riley's statement pretty well quashed it. But again, Phoenix is so limited that really the best thing they could offer Miami is that first, those 3 seconds, and Bradley Beal. And they can't aggregate, when you're in the second apron, you can't aggregate contracts. So the Heat can't even, or the Suns rather, can't even put 2 contracts together. Miami is not interested in Bradley Beal. Miami had a chance to trade for Bradley Beal before the Suns did, and the Heat pulled themselves out of that chase, in part because of Bradley Beal's no trade clause, but also because they had concerns then about the incredible amount of money that is still on Bradley Beal's deal. And that's the reality that the Suns also face here. I mean, it's not just that Bradley Beal is a $50 million player with a no trade clause. He's got $110 million owed to him the next 2 seasons after this one. And it's just going to make him very difficult to trade, because I think we have enough of a sample size now that when Durant, Booker, and Beal have been out there as a trio, it hasn't worked. We haven't seen it enough, but it also hasn't worked well when we have seen it. And so that's what's so alarming for the Suns, that if they're locked into this group, even when they're at full strength, it's been bumpy to say the least.
Yeah, so again, I do think it's important to note that things can change if things get very awkward between Jimmy Butler and the Heat, and there's only one place that he wants to go, and the Suns are interested. Maybe that changes, but that's a lot of stars that have to align over the next 5 weeks, basically. I've been consistent in reporting this from the start that I don't see that happening. I don't see Miami being interested in Bradley Beal at this stage. At that point, they're better off just keeping Jimmy Butler and either daring him to walk somewhere else in free agency when only the Brooklyn Nets have the cap space to sign him to a max deal, or even just re-signing him and re-upping with him, because Jimmy Butler's a better player than Beal at this stage. His contract at this point in time is not as bad as Beal's, and Butler doesn't have a no trade clause. And that's going to be a sticking point, is if Bradley Beal is going to waive his no trade clause to go anywhere. A lot of teams aren't going to be interested unless he's also willing to get rid of that clause in his contract. And when he came here, he was not willing to do that. So again, maybe that changes. But that's a lot of stars that have to align over a very short amount of time for this to become a reality.
And it can happen. I mean, and I think that's something that even you said when the Jimmy Butler stuff first came out, was like, yeah, like Jimmy Butler's interested. Like, it can happen, and we've seen crazier things happen. I was told that there was no chance Kevin Durant ends up as a Phoenix Sun, right? So it's not impossible, but the more bumps that you have to get over, the harder it is to get there. And you're not dealing with a franchise like a Brooklyn or like a Washington, right? You're dealing with Pat Riley and the Miami Heat, and they also operate with a certain sense of pride and almost like entitlement of like, we are not going to bend to your will. You're going to bend to our will.
Yeah, and the KD thing too, even that had to change substantially compared to when we were talking about it not being a reality, because at that point in time, like, things changed right before the deadline. Kyrie forced his way out. And then that was when KD had the leverage to say, all right, you guys got to do right by me and get me out of here. Here's where I want to go. And that's when things changed. Like, even that situation had to change. So that's why I say, like, Jimmy Butler and the Heat, things have to get really bad over these next couple of weeks. We're not there yet. It could happen, but I just don't see this being a real thing that falls into place for Phoenix.
Yeah, he didn't have the prettiest of performances in the most recent game, which may be a domino that falls in favor of the Suns and their potential chances. But even with that, there's still plenty of more other things external of that need to fall in line, to your point.
Well, right now, with the roster that we have, and they do play basketball very soon. Gerald was out at practice today. We're going to bring you all the injury updates and sound bites you could possibly want right after this final break. Sometimes you just need to go to a non-Phoenix Suns event. Maybe you want to go to a musical. Maybe you want to go to the theater. Maybe you want to go and see a live act, a concert, get your mind off of Phoenix Suns basketball, or maybe you just want to see some Suns basketball for cheap. You can do that with our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is by far and away the best place for you to purchase tickets. I was able to get my beautiful wife her favorite birthday gift I think I've ever gotten her, because of the tickets I was able to afford on Game Time. Thanks to Game Time Picks, it makes getting tickets to events that much easier. It filters out the fluff. It shows you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets just to find the best value. There is so much when it comes to Game Time that you love, including their all-inclusive pricing. All you have to do is just switch that on, and you don't have to worry about any hidden fees, and that is always the worst part about buying tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code PHNX for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHNX for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. And I guarantee you the best place to spend a weekend, a staycation, maybe just a night out. Gila River Resorts and Casinos. Of course, they have multiple different locations: Lone Butte, Vequiva, Santan Mountain. But me, I'm a Wild Horse Pass man myself, because we just had our ASU football quarterfinals watch party there the other day. I was on air for 6 hours straight, and I could only do it because I was powered by the hot chicken sandwich over at Gila River Resorts and Casinos Wild Horse Pass. That's your favorite, the Eagle.
Yes.
I know that you've had that. We've had watch parties out there, but not just our watch parties. So much going on over there, whether it's live table games. You can catch all the actions from their sports book. They have live shows, different types of restaurants from upscale to approachable. They just have one rule: you do you. At Gila River Resorts and Casinos, visit playatgila.com for more details. And while I'm on my ASU train of thought, 199 super chat from Leo. Thank you, Leo. Says, shout out to ASU football. Yeah, not the result that you would have wanted, but an incredible season nonetheless. If you are an ASU fan or want to hear about the greatest story in college football, myself and Anthony Totri, we do cover the Sun Devils for this very channel right here. Hit that subscribe button and go ahead and head on over there. I, again, was live for about 6 hours straight on this channel yesterday, and we came back at 10 a.m. today and did another show recapping the mistargeting call and everything like that. Plus, you can get that sweet ASU merch that Gerald is rocking at our locker, or you can get the Cardinals one like I'm rocking as well. Gerald,
Yes.
we were supposed to talk about this at the start of the show, and then we went off the rails. So put us back on the rails. The Suns had practice today.
They did have practice today. We talked to Josh Okogie and Mike Budenholzer, and on the injury front, Grayson Allen was a full participant in practice today. Beal was more limited with the hip contusion, so he did a little bit, but none of the contact stuff. And then Colin Gillespie was also a full participant. I know a couple people have been asking about him because he fractured the ankle, and we haven't gotten much of an update on him since. So he was a full participant, and Bud said they're looking forward to him making his return kind of through the G League very soon. So that's positive. But for the people that were curious, because Grayson Allen made it through concussion protocol, and then before the game, Bud mentioned some shoulder soreness. And then he was out for that game with the shoulder soreness. So we finally got an answer on kind of what happened there. This is what Bud had to say about Grayson's injury.
So Grayson was a full participant. I think he worked through some stuff before practice. Felt good. I think we'll wait to see how he feels coming out of it. But I think encouraging day for Grayson. Brad, I would call a limited participant. Did a little bit, no contact. So we'll see how he does the next few days.
As far as Grayson, was it just soreness from not being active? Did he make a collision on someone in practice?
No, there was, I don't know the exact circumstances, but he played some 5-on-5 and scrimmaged, whatever day that was, 3-4 days ago, and got tangled up, got hit. There was something that happened in the scrimmage that kind of got worse, overnight, and so that's where he was.
This team hasn't had that much time to practice. So these little pockets over the course of the schedule, for a team that's trying to get themselves back in alignment with what their desires are, is important. And especially when you've been bitten by the injury bug the way that they've been.
Well, bitten real hard and also real randomly as well, where it feels like the injuries change. And Grayson, it's a concussion. Now it's a shoulder. I wouldn't say I'm concerned, but when you add that on to also now missing Bradley Beal too, and not sure when he's going to be coming back, it just feels like we're on a Ferris wheel, Gerald, and we're not allowed to get off And it's just,
No.
we're going up and we're down and we're up and we're down and we're injured and we're not. It's not fun.
It's a merry-go-round, except it's miserable.
It's a miserable go-round.
Misery go-round. It's rough, man. And I do think that takes an emotional and mental toll after a while because you see at the start of the season, okay, we're building some momentum. We're off to a great start. We're winning a lot of close games, but we're getting W's. And then ever since then, they haven't been able to keep a consistent lineup out there, like not even their starting lineup, not their bench lineup, nothing. So that's kind of frustrating. And it's tough because you have role players that have been stepping up. Like we've talked a lot about Josh Okogie and Ryan Dunn supplying this defensive energy, just energy in general off the bench. So since we did talk to Josh Okogie, I asked him about how important that is when a team is in the middle of a losing stretch. And this is what he had to say.
Man, it's important, but at the end of the day, it's a matter of wins and losses. And it doesn't matter how much energy you bring. If we don't win the game, I mean, it's like job. We didn't complete our job. So we got to find a way to continue to do the right things and focus a lot on the process, and then the results will come.
I love he like just went back to like generic answer at the end, but we're not getting wins and losses is true. You absolutely need this to be turned into actual on-court results, but I would argue that it still matters so much that guys like Josh Okogie and Ryan Dunn are bringing that energy, even if overall as a team they're not succeeding, because it creates this baseline of like, it doesn't matter where the vibes are. It doesn't matter if we're losing in this game. Josh Okogie's giving 1,000,000%. Ryan Dunn's giving 1,000,000%. And we've seen that, Steven, be infectious to other players. And if they can get their chemistry right, if they can kind of tweak things a little bit and get back on the winning path, bringing that energy is still consistent for them to reach the next level where they're supposed to be competing for right now.
It is, and that's why I don't like. I appreciate Josh's transparency with his answer, but I still, even through the losses and the disappointment, there are pieces like, I mean, there's remnants at this point, but they still hold some value because you need players to play the way that those two in particular have been playing, which prompted your question. And for Josh in particular, he has no other means to stake a claim in anyone's rotation in a winning capacity, at least, without bringing forth those things as prerequisites for him. So he's been doing that. I feel like he deserves flowers. I know it might not be the prettiest of roses considering the situation the team is in right now, but he deserves to have some attention shine on him for that. And to that point, this team being in such dire straits that they've had to play Ryan Dunn and Josh Okogie at the same time for a team that was built with the premise of spacing and shooting and manipulating the way their defenses want to help, if they decide to help at all, to be so far removed from that to where you're playing two of your defensive pieces that, no disrespect to them, but defenses just don't respect them when they're in catch and shoot scenarios the same way that they would with Grayson Allen or Bradley Beal spaced. It just speaks to the predicament this team is in right now, unfortunately.
It can't be a rookie and the 10th man in your roster rotation that are coming in and setting a tone for you. And I think that's why KD said what he said after the last game. Despite having 30, despite being the best player on the floor for the Suns that game, was, I got to come in and impact the game with my energy, because we can all sense it in the starting five when they're out there. And this was the case with Book in the lineup, without Book over the last handful of games. Like, they have not been starting games off. They haven't been starting second halves off the right way. So you can't have your rookie coming in and making a tangible impact. You can't have your 10th man coming in and making a tangible impact and call it infectious if you're not actually taking it to heart and doing the same thing.
Yeah, you're right. And with Ryan Dunn, I obviously I love Ryan Dunn, right? And I love the prospects that he brings to this team long term, and was really excited at the beginning of the season with his shooting. But you are putting him in a situation where he's about 10 times more important than he should be on a roster, especially for like him and Oso, who are two later picks in this draft as well. And you can praise James Jones, who we talked about earlier. You could praise about the scouting and the front office for finding two players who, when you do need them, can play minutes and make an impact. Your problem inherently lies with the fact that they are not additions. They are not supplemental pieces. They are now the foundation of, if Ryan Dunn's not playing 20 to 25 minutes per game, this Suns team can hit their ceiling. And that is not just because Ryan Dunn shot like he did at the beginning of the season, Steven. It's because everything around Ryan Dunn has shifted so dramatically and their needs have showed so much. They're like, okay, well, we have no choice but to rely on this guy. And as much confidence as you can have in him, or J.O., whose offense has been, improved this season from beyond the arc, and Brendan Clean put it out there around the rim. Josh Okogie is doing really well too. Those are supposed to be things that you're excited about on the margins of a winning team, not the core of how do we save the Phoenix Suns from being under 500.
And I'm glad you mentioned that in particular, because that's where my whole blue collar boys thing came from. This team had a lot of pretty skilled finesse type things at the top. They're littered with that, quite literally. But how do you balance that? Because when you come playoff time, you need pieces that are going to do those things that are not showing up on the box score, the things that are not as pretty, the things that are rather gritty and putting your body on the line, and the things that are just kind of just generally not seen by the public eye. That is exactly what Royce O'Neal brings in terms of the values that's provided. Same thing with Ryan Dunn. Same thing with Josh Okogie. I mentioned it with Espo maybe a week or so ago. This team needs an enforcer.
Yeah, they do need an enforcer. They need to get back in the win column in the worst way. And so one of the big questions at practice was, okay, you guys feel like you've been playing with better effort recently, just haven't been getting the results. How close are you to actually getting the results and getting back on track? And this is what Bud and Okogie had to say.
Yeah, no, I mean, you look at the Golden State game and, we had the lead in the fourth quarter. You look at Memphis the other night, I think we have the ball to tie it up a couple different times. And, so we're there. But it's just, you got to make a few more plays defensively, make a few more plays offensively. And, that's what, there's a fine margin of error or winning and losing in our league. And we've been on the wrong side of it, but we can get on the right side.
I mean, these past couple games, I feel like as a team, we've been playing extremely hard. Just haven't been resulting in wins. It's kind of funny because, earlier in the season when we were winning a lot of close games by 1 or 2 or 3 points. Now we're losing a lot of close games by, 1 or 2 or 3 points. It's just how basketball works. But I know this, the fight of this team, I know if we stay together, can continue to stay together, we'll be good.
Let me just preface this by saying I'm proceeding with caution
Sure.
when I ask both of you this question, but you heard Bud mention it, you heard J.O. mention it. Is it a positive? And can you maybe look with a slight bit of hope that even throughout the constant losing recently, you haven't seen that type of effort fail, even if it hasn't led to the results that you want?
Yes, I disagree with the assessment that the effort has been there, constantly throughout these last handful of games.
But
I think
Coach
there
said so.
I think there have been a couple of games where that's true, and I think that they just didn't get there. I don't think last game was that example. I think the first half was terrible, and then the second half they turned things around because they were down 14 to a Grizzlies team that had like 8 of their active players on the roster. So I think it's good that they're saying all the right things, but we've been saying this for weeks. I need to see it now. Show me.
I mean, the lip service and all of the talking and being able to identify the problem there's problem identifiers and there's problem solvers. Who's going to solve the problem? Everybody knows what the problems are. They can speak on it in different ways and come from multiple different opinions and perspectives. Who's going to solve it? Solve it. Put the action to the words and all the things that you guys are saying that you see.
It's crazy. I just got like a flashback to last season near the end when KD was asked who's the leader on a basketball team. And he's like, oh, well, coach is supposed to be leader. And then Frank Vogel had a different answer. And for some reason, it just right back in my brain. That made me very sad. Let's make everybody laugh. Let's read some super chats to end off this edition of PHNX Suns. The first one of the new year, by the way, starting off the year strong. Let's go with Be Calm, See Clearly. Let's do the funny one, okay? Be Calm, See Clearly is back. End of 2024 was a downtime for Be Calm, See Clearly. Very normal super chats, very down-to-earth super chats. 2025, back and better than ever. Booker needs to get a BBL. Then boom, championship. All I have to say to that is BBL Booker. BBL Booker.
I got nothing to add to that.
And for all of you on TV who are tuning into PHNX Suns and hearing me say that, just remember the party always continues over at gophnx.com. That includes all of Gerald's fantastic writing all gophnx.com. It might as well just be a diehard. Click the diehard tab and click join today. Speaking of diehard, Psycho Blue with the second super chat of the day, $5. Thank you, Psycho Blue says, Basketball Cthulhu wants to remind fans Beal probably doesn't want to be trapped by his own no trade clause if Phoenix isn't for him like he hoped. There is a human element to that, Gerald, that maybe Bradley Beal felt like he would be more welcomed, more wanted, more at home in Phoenix. And with the way the on-court product has looked, you can maybe see that he would think differently.
Maybe, but he likes living here. His family is here, and his boys are, he was talking about last year, trying to find flag football for them out here, and they've kind of ingratiated themselves here now. So I do think that's part of the equation. And I think he genuinely meant what he said when he first got here. Like, I want to play under the lights. I want to play in big game situations. It obviously hasn't panned out that way, but I think he left Washington where he was comfortable for a reason. He wanted to come to a team that he believed he could win with. I think these guys don't share our belief that this team is cooked or that they're not going to get it together. I think they genuinely think that if they get healthy, if they get enough games together, they can get back on the right track. So in terms of whether he'll waive his non-trade clause or not, I don't think that's on his mind right now. And again, maybe that changes over the next few weeks. If they don't win a game between now and the trade deadline, best believe we'll be talking about something very different. But we have to wait and see how it pans out. And at this point in time, Beal is aware that he has that power to dictate where he goes. And I think he wants to still be here.
Nothing else to add to that.
Well, then we got nothing else for all of you in here right now. We appreciate all of you starting your new year off with PHNX Suns and PHNX Sports. Make sure you hit that like button on your way out. Definitely not enough likes in here. We need the likes. If you're listening on audio, which we always forget to shout out our sweet, sweet audio listeners. There's so many of you, and we appreciate all of you. If you're feeling so inclined, drop a 5-star review for your guys. Let us know what you love about the podcast. And who knows, maybe eventually we'll read some on air. If there's enough, we got to get some more 5-star reviews, but we might read those on air. Make sure you subscribe to PHNX Sports. Like I mentioned, we have Sun Devils, Wildcats coverage, D-backs coverage is going to be coming back, Cardinals coverage as well. So much right here on PHNX Sports for you. Make sure you don't miss a single bit of it by hitting that notification button as well. If you want to keep up with everything practice related and everything Phoenix Suns related, follow us on social media at PHNX_Suns. And of course, that means you have to follow Gerald at Gerald Bourguet to get all of his reporting. If you waited until the show today, you didn't know about Jusuf Nurkic, and that's because you weren't following Gerald. You can follow myself at Erik Ruby. I'm not reporting. I'm usually just screaming. And you can follow Steven at StevenPG3. Does anybody want to take us home today?
I can do it.
Go ahead, Steven.
Please.
Nothing you haven't heard that's new in terms of what I'm about to say, but there's a lot of basketball going on outside of the Phoenix Suns. Please don't constrain yourself to only watching the Suns as your sole means of providing what I deem you love, which is just watching basketball. Take yourself away from it for a little bit. I promise you the players are doing the same and watching other teams across the league. You do the same if you have the means, and just enjoy the game. And then hopefully this team at some point circles back around and brings what we all have expected to see them bring.
Before we end, totally forgot to bring it up. NBA All-Star voting. First wave came in today. Devin Booker and Kevin Durant were on the ballot. Let's take a look. KD doing KD things, coming in second when it comes to front court players in the Western Conference, over 1,200,000 votes. Devin Booker, 9th place, and the West Coast backcourt voting only 120,000 votes. Any surprises here, gentlemen?
Not really. I am a little surprised that KD's ahead of LeBron. That's
Yes.
cool. That's, I mean, like the
playing better.
KD fans showing out. Good for them.
I mean, shout out to K. Adams.
Yes.
Features
Yes.
probably more than anything.
That probably helps. Devin Booker, I'm not surprised. I would like to see that number higher, but I understand like all-star voting is loaded. Suns fans, show up for your guy, but at the same time, we need Devin Booker to play a little bit better.
We do, and maybe he will. We'll be back, post-game show, Indiana Pacers. We also will, I don't think we have a show in between then. I think that's our next show of the week. So tune in then, pregame, postgame coverage, all right here on PHNX Sports, and please just try, like Steven said, to enjoy basketball.
We all silly like the mayor.